The great journey is nigh, and nothing, not even the flood, can stop it. Boo.
The internet, it's great, isn't it? Because before, we had an allotted time between 10 a.m. and 10:35 a.m. at lunch/recess, where we could debate Mario vs. Sonic, Coke vs. Pepsi, Star Wars versus Harry Potter, Superman vs. Goku. But now,
Halo is one of gaming's most iconic franchises. Ask anyone what console they prefer, and after some time, the software, the exclusives, will be brought up as reasons for someone's preference. After the 90s were dominated by Sega, Sony, and Nintendo, the release of Halo Combat Evolved is probably the single reason why Microsoft was able to show up to the console scene with the Xbox in the early 2000s without being laughed out of the building.
maybe that's where Soulja Boy went wrong.
But as a Nintendo PlayStation kid, my Halo experience consisted mostly of playing at neighbors' houses, seeing memes, and knowing the series gained a lot of respect, and hearing constant versus matchups pitting PlayStation and Xbox against each other. Like clockwork, anytime I would watch an IGN countdown or debate in the mid to late 2000s, I was always met with the same sentiment.
PlayStation needs a Halo competitor. Where's Sony's answer to Halo? Is Killzone the Halo killer? None of this would matter if we just kept making Sly Cooper games.
But hearing all of this talk about Halo and how PlayStation was lacking when it came to first-person shooters and multiplayer games, I grew an idea of what Halo was in my head. If people said Killzone was the answer, I imagined Halo to be a hyper-violent, gray, self-serious game. If PlayStation fans judge Halo so harshly for being the flagship Xbox game and not holding a candle to God of War or Uncharted, it must be a letdown. After almost 6 years of playing Destiny, Bungie's Halo follow-up, I expected a self-serious story because let's face it, the darkness and light in vanilla D1 is a little self-serious.
Well, guess what? I finally did it. I finally played the Halo trilogy, and you know what? In hindsight, all of those debates, all of those questions were correct. PlayStation does need an answer to Halo, but not because they need a competitive sci-fi first-person shooter.
What surprised me most in my time playing Combat Evolved, Halo 2, and Halo 3 was honestly the tone. Because of how I saw Sony position their front and center games like The Last of Us or God of War, I expected Halo to be super serious, like what was elevated on the PlayStation side. I thought Master Chief was going to be a Duke Nukem spewing Monster Energy relic of 1999 ideas of an alpha male character with no self-awareness.
I was wrong. I was very wrong. Halo is a joy. It's lighthearted, it's fun, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and Master Chief is a few shots away from just being a silent protagonist.
And that's why I'm looking back on this decades-old PlayStation needs a Halo. It doesn't need a sci-fi first-person shooter game with multiplayer. It needs a game that doesn't take itself so seriously. I racked my brain really hard since rolling credits on Halo 3. Since the start of the PlayStation 3, what PlayStation first-party games have been unabashedly themselves, campy, and there to have a fun time? Well, after a good few minutes, all I could come up with was Infamous and Infamous 2, not Second Son, and Spider-Man, kinda.
But Spider-Man's been fun. Spider-Man's been fun for decades because people took time. Multiple groups and teams of writers were able to flesh out and characterize an identity for that world and character to give us all an expectation of what we get out of Spider-Man. So when I look at what other stuff PlayStation is doing, as much as I love Ghost of Tsushima and The Last of Us, Horizon's really good too, I just... like, there's gotta be some space for some fun, lighthearted B-movie style stakes, right? Right?
The first year of PS5 era Sony, we've seen a big focus on the idea of blockbusters. Sure, we have games like Ratchet & Clank, which have persisted through the culling of every other PlayStation mascot and thankfully retain most of their PS2 vibe. But when we look at titles like Returnal, Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, and a Last of Us remake,
there's not a lot of room for low-stakes, dumb fun.
Just sad fathers.
Imagine if, because of the success of The Dark Knight, every superhero film for the rest of time was as self-serious and dramatic as The Dark Knight. I personally would get sick of that by the time of, like, The Dark Knight 4. In a world of everything being The Dark Knight, Halo's like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Halo is really just a love letter to cheesy sci-fi with some very, very fun gameplay, incredible music, and bombastic set pieces. It's one of the most fun campaigns I've ever lived through, and believe it or not, there's actually some thoughtful commentary on an us versus them conflict through the cutscenes as well as gameplay structure. And to top it all off, every game in the trilogy's great, and they just get better. I do hear mixed things about Halo 4 and 5, and maybe we revisit that after I catch up. But with Infinite on the way, it seems like 343 is reaching back to this simple, fun storytelling, and it seems like it's lost on some PlayStation fans. They look at Halo, the crowning jewel of Xbox, the way The Last of Us is for PlayStation, and they judge it for not being as narratively impressive or stunning, when in reality, Halo's just having a fine time being Halo and going for Predator or Aliens, or even James Cameron's Avatar, instead of The Dark Knight.
And hey, maybe you want everything to be The Dark Knight, or The Last of Us. That's fine, and PlayStation, they got you covered. But if you're a PlayStation fan who thinks you understand Halo, I'm willing to bet you're probably wrong on some level, because I was. And this fall, I do think Halo Infinite will surprise people. And who's to say, a year from now, if Microsoft can nail Hellblade 2 and Starfield, and Halo Infinite can get back to what makes this trilogy so special, 20 years later, I really think Xbox Game Studios' variety is gonna be unmatched. But on to more important things. The thing people don't understand about Pepsi is that it just pairs perfectly well with pizza the way Coke doesn't. Pepsi's got a bit of spice to it.
Regret. Catchy. Any idea what it means?
Dear humanity, we regret being alien bastards. We regret coming to Earth. And we most definitely regret the Corps just blew up our raggedy-ass fleet. Hoorah!
You know what? I really don't know.